or good morning or good evening. We have an international audience today, so wherever you are joining us from, a very warm welcome from me, and welcome to this webinar on Buying Better, how innovation is helping to unlock government procurement for SMEs. I'm Siobhan Benita, I'm a former UK senior civil servant, and I'm delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum that serves civil servants all around the world, and our knowledge partner today, MasterCard. So in terms of today's topic, procurement is one of the largest areas of government spend, and if used well, it can be used to deliver policy objectives and to drive innovation in the economy. But governments can sometimes struggle to get the widest range of possible bidders, as many small and medium-sized enterprises often don't bid for those government contracts. And this is bad for government, which misses out on new ideas, and also bad for the firms that miss out on valuable business. Now, there are several reasons for this, and we'll be discussing those in the webinar today. But technology and innovation are really helping governments to better engage potential SME suppliers. And as we slowly emerge from the pandemic, it's more important than ever as governments look to stimulate economies to get growth back again, that they get as many of those SMEs involved as possible. In a minute, I'm going to introduce our fantastic panel today, and we will hear a few opening words from them. But actually, after that, we're going to allow as much time as possible to take questions from you, our audience. So please, on whichever device you're using, you should see there's a Q&A function, a Q&A button on your screens. Please, at any time during this webinar, from now onwards, send in your questions using that Q&A function. We've got a great panel here, so please do use this opportunity to really pick their brains. So now to introduce our brilliant panel. First, we will hear from Paul Allison, who is Head of Financial Services at the Crown Commercial Service here in the United Kingdom, which means he leads the UK's largest public sector buying organisation. His remit includes establishing solutions for use by the UK government and wider public sector in categories such as insurance, debt recovery and payment solutions. Paul has over 20 years experience predominantly in the public sector. Then we will hear from Crystal Fiallo, who is Deputy Director at the General Directorate of Public Procurement in the Dominican Republic. She was the first director of the Ministerial Cabinet of the Dominican Republic and a founding member of the Global Shapers community of the World Economic Forum in the DR. She was also a consultant for the project to support the reform of public administration of the European Union and has taught administrative law at the National Institute of Public Administration. We're really pleased to have Crystal here with us today. Then we will hear from Olga Bell, who is Vice President for Government Engagement at our knowledge partner MasterCard, based in the USA. And in this role, Olga identifies opportunities for MasterCard to partner with the public sector on key strategic topics, including financial inclusion, economic development, supporting small and medium enterprises, and supporting economic recovery of key sectors. And last, but by no means least, we will hear from Paula Medina, who is Deputy Head of Division for Infrastructure and Public Procurement in the Public Governance Directorate of the OECD, where he's led the organisation's work on public procurement since 2014. In this capacity, he is helping member and non-member countries in their efforts to improve the legal and regulatory frameworks and institutional arrangements of their public procurement systems, helping to make them more strategic, effective, and impactful for the lives and well-being of citizens. So I'm sure you'll agree we do have a really stellar panel with us here today. So as I say, please don't be shy. Please do send in your questions. Without further ado, I'm going to invite Paul to give us his opening comments. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Siobhan. And yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, as Siobhan has said, good morning or good evening. So I understand there's a great variety in terms of where people are dialing in from today, which is fantastic. I myself am in the south of England on a cold, grey day, which I suppose isn't that uncommon for England. But it's a real pleasure, despite the weather, to be invited to join this panel, discuss how innovation is helping unlock government procurement for SMEs, but also I think how innovation can and or will unlock it for SMEs as well. So as Siobhan has said, I work in the Crown Commercial Service, or CCS, in the United Kingdom. And we are part of central government in the UK. And as Siobhan has also said, we are the country's biggest public procurement organisation. Now, our remit cuts across every level of the public sector. And in 2021, we helped our customers, so we refer to the public sector as our customers because they use us. We help them achieve commercial benefits in excess of £2 billion. Now, primarily we do that by creating commercial agreements using competition among suppliers to increase value and quality. And last year, the public sector spent more than £21 billion through our commercial agreements. So it's fair to say that we have an important role to play in supporting SMEs. Now, specifically, I lead our financial services group, but CCS's remit is common goods and services for the UK public sector, all common goods and services, so a real broad remit. And I wanted to start by giving you, first of all, some insight on the UK government's focus on SMEs. So from a UK government perspective, there are a number of key areas being focused on. And in no particular order, there's payment on time. It's a real drive of government to pay its suppliers on time. So we have targets of paying supplier 90% of invoices within 5 days, 100% within 30. But we're also working to ensure that our prime contractors are paying through their supply chains on time as well. We want to increase visibility. So we want to increase visibility of contract opportunities above £10,000. They're all published on something that we call Contracts Finder, and that increase of visibility, of course, in terms of that level of spend, gives greater opportunity for SMEs to see exactly what's going on, what opportunity there are for them in the public sector. We also want to remove barriers as a government. So, a couple of examples. The central government has established an SME advisory panel. That panel is made up of industry experts, entrepreneurs, people essentially who understand SMEs, who work in and who own SMEs and can advise government on policies and practices. They're a really important, I suppose, panel of experts that we can lean upon. The central government also has a small business team which works across government in supporting the various arms of government in their drive to work more closely and better with SMEs. It's also important, of course, for government to continue to measure success, actually. So, we publish performance figures just to give that transparency of what we are doing. And, if we are committing and delivering on what we say we will do. And last but not least, each department, each arm of the UK government has an SME champion at senior levels who will do just that. They will work towards improving the way that particular department works with SMEs. Now, from a Crown Commercial Services perspective, a little bit more of a focus on what we do. If I sort of cast your minds back to the £21 billion of spend I refer to, almost perfect timing. Late last year, CCS published our refreshed SME action plan, which of course ties in naturally with government's drive on the issue. So approximately 3/4 of the suppliers on the agreements that Crown Commercial Service has in place are SMEs, and we have in total around 20,000 suppliers on our agreement. So a significantly large number of SMEs with whom we work. However, only 13% of the direct spend that flowed through our commercial agreements last year went to SMEs. Now, since 2018, that figure has doubled. But of course, what that says is that there is more that we can do. And I don't think anybody would shy away from that. But our plan this year is to focus on some specific areas. We want to look at better systems through which SMEs can work with us. We want to try to drive greater consistency in documentation. So if an SME is bidding for work and they pick up one particular set of documentation, it doesn't look dissimilar from a second pack of documentation. We have executive level championing of SMEs across the business as well to provide a real core focus on it. Getting a little bit down into the detail, we also want to make sure that we focus on how we structure our agreements. To give SMEs the best opportunity to bid and be part of that agreement, but also then to have the best opportunity to actually secure business once they've secured a place on the agreement. And we are working regularly with our own SMEs once they are on our agreement to see how we can support them. and SMEs will regularly need a different type of support from us. So it's how we can support them whilst also being fair to other suppliers to give them, an equal shot at the prize, so to speak. I need also to touch upon, if I may, the opportunities that I think are presented to the United Kingdom as a result of the UK's exit from the European Union. Being no longer tied to EU regulation, we're able to focus on UK growth and productivity, maximising value for money and social value, and promoting efficiency, innovation and transparency. And the transformation will enable great opportunities for SMEs. So I think most recently, government published its response to the replies we'd had in the consultation. And there are some really interesting things coming out of that, actually. I think there's going to be a drive to ensure that the public sector engages much earlier and much better with the market when procuring. Even all the way to the point of, can we and how do we give those suppliers deeper down in our supply chains, who are traditionally the SMEs, the smaller companies, how do we give those organisations the opportunity to escalate to buying organisations issues that they're facing with payment terms from the prime contractor, for example. So looking at things in quite a different way. I'm just looking at time and I think I'm doing okay, but as I say, some really interesting things going on in the UK government, a focus that has been there, that remains, that is being, I suppose, strengthened as we look ahead to what we can do post our exit from the EU. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's a really good way to start, because I think you've set out some of those overarching issues that I think our other speakers will probably be familiar with as well, and the audience be familiar with. So just a quick recap, the focus on the government on ensuring that payments are made on time, not just from the government, but also along the supply chain from primary kind of suppliers down to their SMEs, increasing the visibility of opportunities for SMEs in the first place. The idea of an SME advisory panel where you say that you have entrepreneurs and small business owners themselves talking to government. So getting that kind of engagement from,
that's right,
I think really important. And then when you said a current focus on looking at the systems themselves and the consistency of like the paperwork and the consistency of the documents, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, because I think every country is going to have its unique context for this, the context for the UK having left the European Union is, are there changes now that can be made that would help SMEs that
absolutely
we weren't able to do before? Thank you so much, Paul. I'm sure there's loads of issues there that the audience and our other speakers will want to pick up on. I'm now going to invite Crystal to give us her comments. Over to you, Crystal. Gonna have to take you off mute, Crystal. Thanks.
Sorry, this is live.
Thanks.
Good morning from the Dominican Republic. Nice to virtual meet the panelists in this webinar. I want to thank the staff of Global Government Forum and MasterCard for organizing this panel, bringing the important subject of challenges and opportunities of SMEs participation in public procurement market. So right now I'm going to show you some slides that will give you the broad view, the panorama of the Dominican Republic national procurement system. Let's start. So this is our strategic compass, which give us the orientation of our public procurement system. We have the National Development Strategy, we have the programmatic guidelines and multinational plan that all the institutions have to align their operative planning to this national multi-annual plan. We have the government program that has government goals that we have to also include, and the presidential goals. Next slide. In order to give more support to the promotion of the participation of the SMEs in the Dominican Republic public market, we have legal support that comes from the Constitution. Our national Constitution establishes in the Article 222 the promotion of popular economic initiatives and has highlighted the promotion, the conditions for the integration of the informal sector into the national economy, encouraging and protecting the development of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, cooperative, family business, and other forms of community partnership for work, production, savings, and consumption, which generate conditions to allow them to access to finance and technical assistance and training. This is really important because it comes from the higher norm and for us is like our support to any action that we do. Next slide. We also have the Chapter, which is the international agreement that probably you know and you have heard about establishes that the government that signed, every government that signed the agreement may carry out public procurement processes for SMEs, which also give us the international view and the international importance of promoting this sector. We have the law for aid the 2008 that gives the mandate to all institutions putting this in like paper, like to accomplish this promotion of participation to the SMEs, that they have to spend the 20% of their public procurement budget buying to SMEs. We monitor this compliance through a system called SysCompass, which is really important that you, if you have the time, you check it out, because we don't only monitor the buying to the SMEs, but we also monitor other stuff that are important for public procurement, innovations, and also to develop the system. Next slide. This is really important because all the data that we get, and that you will see that we give you the broader view of the system. We get it from the transactional portal Public Procurement and Contracting. This is a web platform that allows us to the realization of purchasing, that allows the Dominican Republic and all the institutions to the realization of the purchasing processes, from planning to contract managing. This is really important because we are promoting the planning, so they can, all the institutions plan from the beginning of the year, from the end of the previous year, planning their buying, and they have to include the SMEs and the SMEs women. And we are encouraging the institutions to do this because they always blame the system that is not working, that is slow, that the portal is extremely technical, and we have showed them that it's a matter of planning. And from anywhere of the world you can do it, because this platform is open 24/7. And it's important to know that the data that we are going to show right now comes from here. And if we don't have this data, we cannot take decisions as we have been doing in the previous years and this year. Next slide. Suppliers registry. This is a responsibility of our agency, of our public procurement agency, that when you hear that I use the acronym DGCP, I'm talking about this agency. So we have this suppliers registry that right now we have 160 and 695 suppliers registered, and 11% of them are SMEs registered, okay? And 20 in terms of all the amount, 26,000 registered women suppliers. So, but in terms of SMEs, you have to keep the number 11%. Next slide. Information from the National Public Procurement System. This is where you can have the panorama of all the published processes that we have in the portal from 2019 to 2021. I am going to use that timeline, okay? So published processes, 164,879. And from that, we have received offers, 411,000, and number of closed contracts were 167,000. So this represents, in terms of SMEs, The 55% of that offers received were from SMEs. And the 38% of those contracts that were closed is 38% was SMEs. And the 23% of the total amount contracted or awarded, how you call it, is 23% for SMEs. Next slide. The participation of the SMEs in the public procurement market. This is where can you see the participation punctual, like offers received from the SMEs during the 2009 and 2020 and 21. You can see we have been promoting the participation, and it has increased in terms of offer received. Okay, but we have always look at the offers received as one number and the total amount contracted as another number. So because for us it's important that we get to the total amount contracted, so they get the money, right? That's the way we make the growth. So next slide. Offers received from SMEs per year. Here you can see that in 2019 we got SMEs receive. This is our per year. We had the versus women. We have the 31% of the percentages of SMEs women offers received. It was 31 in 2009 and 2019. Sorry. And 2021 is 32. So we have been looking at a growth, but it's still a challenge in terms of SMEs. Women participation, we have been working really hard to make them enter to the public procurement market. Next slide. Most contracted articles to SMEs by amount. Here you can find the several different goods and services that actually the SMEs here in Dominican Republic get. Since 2019, most of the SMEs have been supplying computer equipment and accessories, and the other things that you see in the list that you can see in the slide, but I'm going to mention some of them. Maintenance, services, and repairs of construction and facility, professional engineering, permanent structures, medical fabrics and dresses, cereal and post products, food and beverage services, advertising, professional teaching materials, and so on. So this is like where when we talk to the SMEs, we talk with them about what they can offer to the state. This is a conversation that actually, if you want to promote the participation, you need to build trust. So when we arrived in 2020, because we have a governmental change in 2020, what we did was to build trust. We start building trust, so the public procurement agency kind of also focus in terms of fighting corruption. Because here in the Dominican Republic, it was one of the subject that actually was more, there was more opacity, no much transparency. So we had to build trust in order to make our registry suppliers grow. And the women participate, and the SMEs believe and trust that they were going to be included in our public market. So next slide. Initiative that we have been promoting, this is my conclusion, in terms of promoting the participation of SMEs in different sectors. We have been promoting several initiatives that comes from with the other rector, the Minister of Industry and Commerce. We have a technical table that we gather them to coordinate efforts, because for us we need the SMEs to be formalized before they enter to the public market. So we have to do a work coordinated with them, so they promote the formalization, and we actually get them to get business with the state, with the government. SME certification, certification for women. This is really important. We have been promoting, but it's a responsibility of the other minister, but we also include it in our promotion of participation from the SMEs. We have been promoting family farming, Ministry of Agriculture, we have been making a connection with their system. So all the units that buy in the institutions, they know what is producing in the Dominican Republic, and they buy smart. Support of agricultural cooperative. Right now, we have a strong initiative in that sense. Industrial registration that we have to buy to the SMEs that produce in Dominican Republic. Insertion of shade house to the public market, and also working with sanitary registration integration. That's for future. Let me tell you before I finish that we have launched in January an executive order that it's 31 from 2022. It's called the 31 from 2022 to promote the participation of the SMEs in 18 institutions program to alleviate the poverty. So they have to ensure that SMEs participate in most, like 50% more of the participation has to be for SMEs for those programs of alleviation poverty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It's so fascinating to get that different perspective from obviously a very different country, from the UK, and then to hear from the Dominican Republic. Again, very quick recap. Very interesting that you have a kind of set aside a quota of 20% of SMEs, and that within that you're also monitoring the female-led SMEs. I think that would be something maybe in the conversation afterwards we can pick up. I think some countries do have those kind of set-asides, other countries don't. Again, the importance, I think, that Paul mentioned, again, using data to shine a light on performance so that you can also then target kind of interventions going forward. You also, like Paul said, the importance of engaging SMEs, and in your context, that sense of building trust, really important. And then really, again, your specific context that you said, you're looking to give even more awards to SMEs when it comes to alleviating poverty programs. So which I'm sure creates some tension between maybe some of the bigger suppliers. So that will be something interesting to pick up in the conversations as well. Thank you so much, Crystal. Over to you, Olga, for your opening remarks.
Great. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to speak alongside these really wonderful civil servants and hear their experiences. So I'm Olga. I am part of the government engagement team at MasterCard. And kind of first, I just want to level set about sort of why is MasterCard interested in this space. So I like to say, Amazon isn't just a river and Apple isn't just a fruit. MasterCard isn't just a credit card company. We're a financial technology company. And historically, we've had a big cards business, but we cover a huge range of digital products and services, from providing digital payments to supporting supply chain transparency to helping clients with cybersecurity needs or analytics and data dashboards. Our business is really built on the concept of trust. And I love, Crystal, that you brought that up as an area of a focus for you all, because for us, it's really the top priority of what we do in every business we engage in. We build the trust between businesses, banks, and people to allow millions of digital transactions to take place. And over the years, we've continued to look at ways that we can build ecosystems based on trust. My team on the government engagement side leverages sort of our global digital payment and data network to provide unique solutions for governments. And over the last 18 months, we've done over 200 initiatives with public sector bodies across 55 countries to help digitize their services, efficiently deliver services for millions of people. And we actually work on both government procurement and SME digitization. So I'm really honored to speak about the intersection of both of those. So I think one of the first topics I really want to dive into is what are the challenges that prevent SMEs from being part of the government procurement processes. But before I do that, I want to sort of take a step back and acknowledge the moment that we're in right now, which is very unique. We've been living in a period with a global COVID pandemic that's been stretching out now for 2 years. And what that's highlighted for all of us, and certainly for governments, is that we live in a deeply interconnected world. It's exposed the vulnerabilities in traditional supply chains. Governments saw this firsthand when they tried to secure protective equipment and medical supplies at the height of the pandemic, and consumers are experiencing this now in many areas where they're trying to buy food, household items, and others. The pandemic has also had a disproportionate impact on women, minorities, and youth, and also on SMEs, which are the lifeblood of economic vitality and economic growth. I think on the positive side, we're seeing that governments are now increasingly looking to build flexibility and resilience in their supply chains and looking for new ways to stimulate the economy and restart key sectors. And government procurement is really one of the biggest levers for doing so. In OECD countries, government procurement represents 12% of their GDP. So what they buy and who they buy from is really one of the biggest tools that they have for spurring economic growth and economic recovery out of this pandemic. And we're seeing more and more governments really looking more broadly about how they can use innovation and technology to better engage SMEs. I think the challenge is that unfortunately a lot of governments are still falling short. And I think we've heard sort of great examples from the UK and the Dominican Republic where they are engaging SMEs, but I think across the board, many governments are very much falling short of their goals of getting sort of contract values up for SMEs. And the question is why? Why is it, despite these ambitions and policies, why are SMEs still not participating the way they should? And we did a study last year and really identified 4 big barriers. One is access and onboarding. So SMEs struggle with access and awareness of government procurement processes. For example, how do they onboard themselves as a supplier? How do they find opportunities to bid where they are, potentially have a chance of winning? And, a lot of them don't have experience with bidding. And it's a very complex process, and they're up against these big companies that have whole departments dedicated to government procurement, and they just don't have that expertise and knowledge of how to do that. The second big barrier we heard was capital capacity. And I actually want to break this out into 2 pieces because they're both very important. One is SMEs don't have the upfront capital to invest in servicing those large government contracts. So let's say I won a $100,000 contract from the government, but I need to invest $30,000 in supplies to deliver on that contract, and I just don't have that capital to do so. Government contracts are often really big and they require a lot of upfront investments. And unfortunately, many SMEs are very capital constrained and sort of can't deliver just from at the start of the project. And then we have the capital constraint on the back end, where you have to wait a very long time, unfortunately, to be paid from a lot of governments. So, from a government, many governments are unfortunately very late on making payments or take a while to go through the processes to make those payments. And it's not unusual to wait for 90 days or more to be paid by the government. And I love sort of some of the examples that Paul mentioned in the UK of overcoming that and sort of actually making sure that suppliers are paid faster. The third big problem that we've heard is just the manual processes of payments and reconciliation. That it's for SMEs and for other suppliers, it's just a very labor intensive and manual process to get a check, reconcile it against the purchase order and the invoice, make sure that they're sort of ticking and tying the books, following up with the relevant payers on the government side. Again, if I think about them competing with large businesses who have huge accounts receivables departments that can manage all of that and have the systems and tools to manage all of that. For SMEs, this is still often a very manual process, and they don't have the dedicated staff to sort of go back and make sure that they're paid and that the invoices and the incoming payments and bills are reconciled. And then I think the fourth that we keep hearing about more and more even now is the problem around security. And so SMEs often have to have a higher level of cybersecurity, data privacy requirements to bid on government contracts, which makes very good sense. Governments don't want to expose themselves to risks, and they shouldn't. But SMEs are behind on that. So again, compared to larger suppliers that have big cybersecurity systems, big data storage and data privacy systems, many SMEs are lacking in those areas. And then it's a struggle for them to really sort of keep up. So I want to talk about now, what are some of the innovations around those 4 barriers that we're seeing where technology and governments can help? And I'll bring in a couple of really interesting use cases. I think on the issue of access and onboarding, Crystal and Paul have given great examples of how they've brought in SMEs for their onto their platforms. Another example I'd love to highlight is in Chile, where we have the Mercado Público government e-procurement marketplace, which is a marketplace for 16 regions. It supports over 100,000 SMEs and 850 public agencies, and accounts for 60% of total public procurement. And it enables SMEs to get on board easily. It enables very easy data sharing and notifications between those 850 agencies that are buying and the 100,000 SMEs that are supplying services. And it has sort of great evaluation criteria as well, for example, for purchasing from certified women-led businesses that allow those public agencies to meet their public policy goals of engaging with more women-led businesses or minority businesses. On the capital capacity side, I'd love to bring in the case of the Dubai SME engagement, where the Dubai SME represents public contracts of $2 billion using a centralized procurement platform that provides access to both government and private sector contracts. And they actually offer financial assistance to support those SMEs and sort of help them bridge their working capital constraints. For example, they can do a local purchase order financing. So once you have a purchase order from a government, it's sort of much easier to get a loan to be able to service that purchase order, as well as peer-to-peer crowdfunding. So you can actually get funding and support from other peers that are SMEs in the space. On the question around payments and sort of how do we actually get suppliers paid faster and more flexibly, one of the interesting things we find is that governments have a very long tail of small value payments. So about 2/3 of procurement contracts and procurement payments are considered low value, which is less than $10,000. But it takes a very long time still for many governments to process those payments. And we can introduce sort of more flexible controls, particularly in very challenging times, to get those payments out the door faster. And here I love the example from the UK with the Crown Commercial Service, where in the height of the COVID pandemic, when the UK government, as all governments, were really struggling to quickly and efficiently procure essential health equipment and sort of goods to fight sort of the COVID infection, they needed to get their suppliers paid faster. They needed to win against sort of other buyers to make sure that they were getting what they needed. And they actually raised the transaction and spending limits for authorized cardholders to be able to buy health equipment and PPE and sort of increase the allowable categories of spend and increase the limits. So that shows how you can sort of quickly change the flexibility and controls for payment products to make sure that we can pay suppliers as quickly and efficiently as possible. I know I'm running out of time, but I would love to dive into any of those topics, and I'll pause there for now and look forward to the Q&A section as well. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Olga. I think there's so much you could say there. It's really good to have those specific examples from different countries at the end as well, to see what different people were doing. But just very quickly, so in terms of the 4 big challenges, I think that you set out, access and onboarding for SMEs, still a big issue. Capital capacity, both at the start and the end of a contract. The manual process, just the bureaucracy around some of the processes, and then those issues around security and data privacy that can be more of a burden for SMEs than others. So thank you so much. to the audience, thank you. We've had a question come in already, but please do send in your questions because we have only one speaker left and then we'll be going to the Q&A session. So absolutely last but not least, Paolo, over to you.
Thank you, Siobhan, and thanks for the opportunity to participate again in a global government forum and bring the OECD perspective on public procurement and some of the challenges our countries are facing. The previous fellow panelists already mentioned some OECD data. In fact, the reason why the OECD works on public procurement is because public procurement is probably the single most important interface between the public and the private sector, which I think is something that we need to understand. We are talking about 12% of GDP and 1/3 of government expenditures that impact many areas of public service delivery, in fact, all areas of public spending. And the pandemic also showed the importance of public procurement. Previous speakers also mentioned that. The advantage of coming as the last speaker, it's kind of, I can summarize some of the topics that were mentioned before. But I would like to bring three main themes. So the strategic value of public procurement and why talking about innovation and SMEs is important. Some of the policy challenges around this topic. And finally, a few examples on the way countries are trying to deal with these complex challenges. And of course, some of them were already mentioned before me. So we know that procurement has this importance, and it's been used and considered by governments to address many of the challenges we are facing, including supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, a study has shown that around 80% of the SDGs should and can be achieved with the support of public procurement, which I think it's quite important. We have seen almost all OECD countries looking at procurement to support climate change and environmental considerations, but also looking at innovation and SMEs. And in fact, 90% of the OECD countries are nowadays using procurement to address these broader outcomes, which I think it's quite important. And we see a lot of impact of this policy approach in terms of using procurement. And that's why the OECD in 2015 set up a recommendation that looks at procurement in a holistic and comprehensive way. And since the adoption of this recommendation, we have been expanding our knowledge and evidence on these topics. Like we developed a benchmarking study on innovation, another one on SMEs, and another one on green. And while the countries are using procurement for achieving these objectives, at the same time, we understand there is still a challenge, and it was mentioned before, about the way we measure the impact of using procurement. So it's very important that when we set up strategies and policies for this, we also look at the measurement framework and the performance measurement, how we can ensure that, in fact, the procurement is the best policy tool for addressing these topics, because we saw in our case only 1/3 of the countries is in fact kind of coming up with measurement frameworks for measuring the impact of these policy choices. And at the same time, I would like to focus more on innovation, because the previous speakers focus a lot on SMEs, and we are seeing a lot of spillover effects in terms of the way these policy choices are addressed. And in fact, once you design a strategy for innovation, it will certainly touch upon green and SMEs, because it's impossible to design these strategies in isolation. So we have seen the impact of these innovative projects, improving efficiency, improving user satisfaction, effectiveness, and service quality as well. But as Paul mentioned, the benefits are not evenly distributed so far. And in fact, I would like to stress that the UK case is not unique. From our research, most of the countries, the share of SMEs that are getting above threshold contracts are between 20 and 40. some outliers go to 50%, while we know they represent 90 to 95% of the economic tissue. So there is still a huge potential that we should try to address. There are some factors that, in fact, are still preventing innovation to develop with the full potential in terms of public procurement. They might be grouped in 2 or 3 clusters. One of them is around risk aversion, the issues of management and coordination, and the lack of capabilities and capacity. Another one related to the resistance to change, the political support, and at space is the legal and regulatory framework. And finally, one around the financial support that was also mentioned before. So I would like to stress that when we would like to come up with these strategies for SME support or for innovation, we need to think about them in a kind of coordinated way. So when you try to come up with an innovation procurement action plan, you need to understand the impact that might have in terms of SMEs, in terms of public procurement. So we see a lot of interesting initiatives. I would not name all of them. They are available in our reports. But we see, for instance, the creation of specific units in the center of government, the availability of documentation or guidance. Also, guidance training is very important for SME development. The availability of help desk services, the creation of competence centers. We have seen that coming up in many OECD countries. And I would like to finalize by providing you with a couple of examples that are really concrete and that might give some food for thought in terms of developing SMEs through innovation. For instance, in Canada, there is this Building Canada Innovation Program that helps startups in terms of testing their solutions through government agencies. And the government provides feedback on the performance of products and services. And when the solutions are fit for purpose, this program gives contracts to startups with these pre-commercial solutions, and through a transparent and open procedure, and then they can supply the government and then test their solutions. This is just one example. Another example comes, for instance, from Norway, where there is a national development suppliers program that creates this dialogue that I was mentioning before, this interface between the public and the private. So I think it's fundamental that we allow countries to develop these kind of platforms. And this platform, in fact, fosters the dialogue between the public and the private sector in terms of bringing the solutions that are innovative and that can make a difference. And when these solutions are presented to the government agencies, then they can start a dialogue directly, bilaterally with the suppliers. I could bring many other examples in terms of the support to advance payments, to develop specific marketplaces like the one mentioned in Chile, like the case of Italy, but we can leave that for the discussion. Thank you, Shiva.
Thank you so much, Paolo. A nice place to end there, because I think you brought in a slightly different perspective by highlighting the need, I think, for civil servants and public servants who will be our audience today to be thinking about this alongside those other big policy challenges. So you can't think about kind of SMEs of procurement in a silo from thinking about how you meet your climate change targets and how you talk about innovation strategies and all of these things, the importance of seeing them all in the round there. And in addition to what Olga was saying, I think you brought in a couple of other maybe big barriers to progress on this. So a risk-averse maybe culture across some of the organizations involved, resistance to change, and maybe some of those legacy kind of legal and regulatory frameworks as well. So in addition to the things that Olga had already mentioned around maybe some of the payments and finance systems as well. And then again, good to have those country-specific examples. So you bringing in Canada and Norway in addition to the ones that we've already heard from our other speakers. So thank you so much to all of you on the panel for giving us your opening remarks. Please, to the audience, keep your questions coming in. I want to kick off, I think, with something that struck me there, where you've all talked about kind of how things are changing for SMEs and how different countries, you've all mentioned different examples of how different countries are helping to support SMEs. Something that Crystal said in particular made me think, to what extent is there an issue between getting the balance right between the support that governments and civil servants give to SMEs compared to maybe some of the bigger suppliers? And how is that balance being considered? And is that in itself creating issues? So is there a fairness issue here? And I'm sure you've all got, I can see how the OECD will have a different perspective because they'll see different countries working on this. And Paul, maybe this is something that's coming up now we've left the European Union in the UK. Are there kind of things that we can do maybe that we didn't do before in terms of some of those targets for SMEs? Crystal, I'm going to come to you first because you specifically have these targets for SMEs. To what extent does that raise issues with the kind of bigger suppliers?
Well, right now we are in conversations with the industries, like the big industries, because we are promoting the SMEs national production in this executive order, and it just launched, and they kind of felt excluded of the executive order because what we said in the executive order, maybe it was misunderstood. We wanted more participation of the SMEs in those alleviation poverty programs, not that they felt or were excluded. So right now, what we're doing, the strategy that we're going to use during February, is that we're going to work with them an action plan of implementing that executive order in order not to exclude any sector. Because that's not the spirit of the executive order. The spirit of the executive order is to promote the national production. But we're not going to promote the SMEs that are intermediators. We want to promote the ones that produce local, even though they buy the materials abroad, but they produce local, so they generate employment. It is important because it's our compass and it's our strategic compass from the government, also from our laws, the Constitution and the Dear Carta that we were talking about. But something that I didn't want to left out of this conversation is the struggle that SMEs live in the Dominican Republic about payment. Olga was talking about the payment issues and all the challenges that we have in that sense. We promote the creation of a table with the Contraloría General de la República, which is the institution that works with all the payment and the contract, in order to make more efficient the payment to the SMEs and all the productive sector in the Dominican Republic. But there's a lot of challenges there because of the bureaucracy that we have. And who suffers the most? SMEs. And let me tell you that we made a diagnosis, and we were the things that came out of that study is that the SMEs women suffer the most because they know how to wait for the payment,
right?
And they have like more patience. And the institutions love to contract with them because they don't go and they call them to I want the payment. So they are the ones that actually are getting a negative impact.
Okay.
So this is a challenge for the Dominican Republic, and we're working on that, and we love to hear from other experiences to also to implement in our country.
Thanks, Crystal. Paul, I'm going to come to you on this. So picking up on Crystal's point there, and as I said, how do you get this balance between kind of supporting SMEs, but making sure it's still a kind of, a fair kind of level playing field for some of the biggest but also, as Crystal said, is there going to be an increased focus on gender? Because I know that's something post the pandemic that the UK government is keen as well to help some of the communities that have been most hit by the pandemic, with kind of gender being one that's been identified.
So no, it's a really good question, actually. I think so if I take the first element, which is that of level playing field, what does this say to the larger suppliers? I think similar to what Crystal has said, this is not about saying, of course, that we no longer want to work with larger suppliers. That would be ludicrous. SMEs themselves would recognise that there are some procurements that they cannot deliver on, they can't be involved in. I think this is more about just identifying and acknowledging the imbalance, and making sure that as much as possible, we can create a level playing field for organisations of any size to bid for contracts for which they are, reasonably placed to bid for. But I think, what we are seeing, and what I kind of touched on earlier, is that there are things that we still can do within the UK to address the imbalance, and I think that for us is kind of the thing that we are looking more to achieve, a balanced and level playing field for our suppliers.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Olga, I know.
In terms of the,
sorry, Paul, carry on.
I was just going to quickly say, in terms of the added value and other policy areas, that would broadly be covered, I think, within our targeting of greater social value, and so being able to use procurement to deliver greater social value is a key aim of the transformation of our public procurement as a result of leaving the EU.
Thanks, Paul. Olga, I know MasterCard have a particular focus on gender as well. So how does that, are you working with specific customers on some particular initiatives? Have you seen this, an increased focus on this over the past months?
We're definitely seeing a lot of focus on gender across the board. And I love, Crystal, your example that it's the women SMEs that are left behind because they're almost least pushy. I think if I were to summarize, I think, look, we're seeing a lot, particularly on the SME side, around helping women get access to capital, which is a broad government goal, but it's also a goal for a lot of our private sector partners, a lot of the banks we work with, that they want to bring in more women and have them have more access to capital. Again, I think we always go back to what are the pain points and barriers that are preventing them. And I think, historically, women have sort of less of a credit history, which makes it very difficult for them to get a loan. It makes it difficult to open a checking account, open a savings or insurance account. And in a lot of places where women might be the head of household or a smallholder farmer, for example, not being able to have an insurance product or access to capital really puts them at a lot of risk for their whole household. So we are partnering a lot with governments across the board to help SMEs and women head of households sort of get that access that they need to in order to thrive and survive in this very challenging time.
Thanks, Olga. Paola, we've had a question for you, but I'm going to come to that in a moment. I also want your view, because I guess from the OECD, you have kind of compared and contrasted different countries' approaches. And some countries, I imagine, in this issue of supporting SMEs will have done what Crystal has said. So we'll have targets for awards to SMEs. From your experience, I know you could talk about this at length, I'm sure, but just very quickly, what's your experience in terms of how well that works in terms of having these targets for SME awards?
Well, thank you. We haven't seen the value of setting aside some hard targets for SMEs or any other policy objective. What we have seen is, of course, some countries establish these targets on, let's say, a soft basis, and they try to approach it by providing training and building the capacity. And I think we need to consider two levels, because there is also the level of the procurement professional that needs to be trained, because as you can imagine, the complexity over the procurement function has been increasing exponentially in recent years, with all these different policy objectives being put, it's environment, innovation, SMEs, social, gender. So in order to also be able to prioritize these different policy objectives, you do need to invest in professionalization strategies, which is something that we have seen in many OECD countries. So this is one level. The other level is looking to the external side, to the suppliers, to the companies, to the SMEs, and try to understand their challenges that were already identified here, and how the government can support these challenges, but still being able to create this level playing field, because I think it's fundamental that we keep the access, we keep the fairness, and we establish the conditions that don't, provoke more imbalance than the one that we already have. So it's very important that we are able to provide, like, for instance, payment terms. Like in South Korea, they pay in 3 days because they use the digital e-procurement system, so they have all the information available, so they can speed up the process. So there are other ways rather than set-asides. And we know, for instance, in regions of the globe, such as Latin America, it's very common to have set-asides, except in Chile. But Chile is a very successful case of incorporating SMEs and gender procurement without setting a target as such. So yeah.
Thanks, Pat. And what you just said there about career, I think, is a really nice way into the first question from the audience that was directed to you, because, but I think this goes to all the panel, actually. I'm going to widen the question a little bit. It says, for the OECD, what is the view of the support that private sector can make to digitize payments to SMEs? Can you provide a successful use case? I think you just did, but I want to broaden that a bit, which is not just the private sector, but I think what role does digital transformation play in general from the public sector as well, in terms of helping SMEs to get more access to some of these contracts? So Paolo, in addition to the example you just gave, are there any other examples from countries where they've used kind of digital technology to help?
Yes, if I may. Well, the private sector is providing solutions and supporting a lot of the digital transformation in governments. And we see the uptake of e-procurement systems, the increased visibility over the opportunities, so more transparency. Also, there is an element that is very important, is the visibility over the supply chain, going to second and third tier suppliers and being able to also support this kind of suppliers when the major contractor is failing or something like that. That can be achieved through digital transformation, digital technologies. And we have seen some cases where, especially after the pandemic, the governments are much more concerned about building the resilience of the supply chain and looking at second and third tier suppliers.
Yeah, thanks, Paolo. Paul, I could see you nodding when Paolo was talking about the importance of kind of digital technologies there. This is obviously something I think that the UK are focused on as well, and how you've changed the processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so from a digitization of payment perspective, and then sort of the more broader digitization. So just on the former. So in short, I think the answer is yes, the private sector has got a key role to play in supporting that. So that's quite a specific area of passion of mine. So I lead on the financial services work, and we are just about to go out to market to find payments to replace our current payment solutions commercial agreement, which does support government in making payments out to SMEs and other suppliers. We're also exploring open banking this year, which is still a term that a lot of people find it hard to define, but fundamentally it's about the ease of payments, both in and out of government. And I think that for me is a when as opposed to an if. The broader digitization, absolutely, and Paolo talks about some really good examples, but I mentioned in my opening about how can we digitize and make it a much easier journey for SMEs to engage with government in terms of registering for opportunities. So that is happening, and that will continue to improve as well.
Thanks, Paul. Olga, I mean, I could see you nodding along there.
Yeah.
MasterCard's kind of area, and you did mention as one of your barriers the kind of manual burden for some SMEs. So to what extent are kind of digital technologies now going to help in this area?
Look, I think digital technologies have a huge role to play in reducing the processing time and the effort required, particularly for those small value payments, which, as I mentioned, are 2/3, right? In the US, when Bill Clinton was president, he said, you know, he had this example where it takes a government to buy an $8 hammer, it takes the government $25 in terms of people time and effort required. So I think digital processes can streamline so much of that and allow the government and the procurement agencies to focus on those bigger, more strategic, maybe more risky contracts and really kind of focus their time there. But I think what we often see is that digital technologies are not meeting their full potential. And there's a lot of sort of, and I think Paulo mentioned this, there's a lot of resistance to change. Because if you just install a digital product, but have all the old processes and the old approvals and the manual sort of efforts, that digital technology is not going to solve the issue. So the question is, how do we actually change the way we work and the way we approve internally and externally to use that digital technology to truly transform the efforts?
Thanks, Olga. Crystal, for you on the idea of digital payments, you said how, you know, for SMEs, particularly female-led SMEs, they struggle to get the payments in time. Digital payments, is that helping? Is that part of the solution in the DR?
Sorry, we are exploring several solutions, and even we are talking about right now, like a digital market for public procurement, which is like a kind of online stores with the common goods and services that we obtain as a public administration. And we are right now working on the bill project that is going to reform our system, our public procurement system. So in that bill project right now that it's in the hands of the president, we work on reflecting what we want to do in terms of improving the things about payment, and also digitalization of some processes that we can do as DGCP. We can do like a big project, like a big purchase, like a convenio marco. I don't know how to say that in English, because it's a modality. That convenio marco, it's a huge purchase that we are doing for the public goods that that are standardized in the public administration of the Dominican Republic, and it could be led by the DCP. And that way it's going to be like an online store that is validating the SMEs, Registry, and the big industry, so the public institutions can go and buy immediately. And we have to work in that online store with digital payments. So those are efforts that we are going to be exploring this year and next year. But it's a challenge. We know building trust for us, the first subject in that conversation was I need the payment. We have the 20% advance for SMEs in the Dominican Republic of the total contract, which is really good. They get immediately, they are awarded by a process. They get the 20% on front, which it helps them to be sustainable. And I don't want to forget about what Paulo said about sustainability. We are working in sustainability and environmental policies in public procurement in the Dominican Republic, because right now we're going to receive the first draft of the national public procurement policy in a green public procurement office policy. So the green public procurement policy is going to bring the smart buying of the government in the Dominican Republic. We're not going to buy because we need to buy. We're going to buy smart, so it stays for longer in the offices, and we're going to buy a good share because it's going to have, well, you know, all the
circular economy.
Economy. So we're trying to implement that. It's going to be a challenge, but this year we're going to get that draft and we're going to put it in the table. So this is going to be a subject that well, and for that we have to work on the SMEs offers. So we have been training some startups that are working with the green technology and green offers and goods, so they can be prepared to offer to the state after this policy is approved.
Great. So again, all of that has to come together and be seen in the round. I can't believe the time has gone so quickly. We are almost out of time for our conversation. I just want to fit in. We've had a few questions in from Dolores Sue, I think. I'm going to combine a couple of them, and really they are about, I think, kind of barriers right up front for SMEs, kind of prerequisites really. So Dolores first asked Crystal what the SME certification structure is accepted by Dominican. So what's the cost to SMEs certification process? But then also asked you, Paul, in the UK, does the UK government require SME certification or just self-declaration, and who pays for that? So I think this is kind of a broader issue around the cost of that very first kind of how do you actually even get yourself in a position where you can be in the system. So just very quickly, because we are running out of time, Paul, I'm going to come to you first on this issue of certification. What's required for an SME to even register themselves?
Sure. So I think I could probably interpret this question in a few ways, but fundamentally, the requirements on suppliers that we have to bid into our contracts are likely to be the same whether you're smaller or not. But it's a very fair question insofar as the thinking, and we talk about regulatory, policies that can help, but a big thing is around behaviours. And so what can we do up front that means the requirements we're placing on our suppliers are as proportional as possible. Yeah. So it's not to say that there's a flat, this is what you must do if you are an SME in the UK to bid for a public sector contract. There are variations, but for me it's all about that intelligent thinking up front to make sure that what you're asking for is proportionate to what it is you're looking to achieve through the procurement.
Thanks. And Paul, because this is the last kind of round of questions, I'm just going to say, what's your kind of hope for SMEs going forward? What do you want to see over the coming years?
I want to see SMEs being given, the same opportunity to bid for contracts as any other supplier in the marketplace. I think there is so much benefit to be gained from SMEs. Innovation is an absolute key priority of the government. We know how responsive SMEs can be. I could sit here and list the benefits for quite some time, but I think seeing more SMEs involved, just seeing more engagement and them encountering less barriers is something that we'd like to achieve.
Thanks, Paul. Crystal, very quickly, the issue of certification, who pays for that in the Dominican Republic?
No, the certification doesn't have a cost here. You just have to pay for the administrative documents that you have to deposit with to apply to the certificate. The certificate, women's certificate to SMEs was launched last year, and a coordination work with us and the Ministerio de Industria y Comercio. So we launched it last year, and we gave the whole 21, so they can prepare and they can migrate from being an SMEs to SMEs woman and apply for the 20%, because 15% is for the 15% is for the SMEs in general, and 20% including the SMEs woman. So woman has access to the 5%, the 20%, and the 100%.
Great, thanks. And finally, from you as well, what's your hope for the future? It sounds like you're doing an awful lot already in the DRS. What do you hope to see achieved from that over the coming months?
Well, I hope to have more human resources to apply all our dreams in the public procurement agency in the Dominican Republic. And also, I hope to see a stronger SMEs and SME women's sector, stronger, trustful, and also working coordinated with us as an agency and also with the big industry, so they understand that they can actually survive together in a public procurement environment that has the set of rules really just for everybody.
Thanks, Crystal. Olga, I mean, MasterCard work with so many different organizations, different public sector organizations around the world. Are you optimistic that things are going to get better for SMEs when it comes to public procurement?
Absolutely. I think it's now top of mind, as we've heard, for so many governments to include SMEs there. I think combined with the innovation, technology, and tools that we have now available, I think it's we're ready to leapfrog sort of where we have been and go where we can go. And I think, as I mentioned, especially in the recovery from the COVID pandemic, it's been an impetus for change for all of us. So I'm very optimistic about the next few years.
Thanks, Olga. Paolo, the final word from you in terms of, you know, you look at so many different countries. Are you optimistic as well? And what do you see as being kind of the big changes coming over the next coming months?
Yeah, thank you. I am optimistic, but we need to remain vigilant. We see a lot of still unnecessary barriers there, like, for instance, suppliers registry, that are the effect of legacy issues, you know, that can be overcome quickly if there is the political will. I think we also need to be vigilant in terms of ensuring that the recovery phase will address SMEs needs in a due manner. Because we might face the risk of spending quick and dirty, and that will create an issue in terms of the visibility over the spend and also the access of SMEs to these public procurement opportunities. So we do need to have a proper framework in place for the recovery phase. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paolo. So a nice way to end, I think. You're all optimistic, big opportunities if governments can get this right, but also some risks that we might fall back on old ways of working. So I just want to say a final, very big thank you. Thank you to the audience for sending in the questions. There's actually a questionnaire gone around to everybody who's in the audience now. Please do take a couple of minutes to fill that in if you can. I'd be hugely grateful if you could. It just means we give you exactly the type of webinars that are useful for you going forward. A massive thank you to our panel today, to Paul, to Olga, to Paolo, and to Crystal. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and giving you giving us so much of your time. To the audience, we will be sending round a link with this video so you can watch it all again, or you can share it with colleagues who were unable to watch today. And there will be as well an article written over the next week or so with the key issues from this webinar, which will be sent to all of you as well, and you can share that with your colleagues as well. So it just leaves me to say a big thanks to MasterCard for being our knowledge partner again today. And I look forward to seeing all of you again very soon on another one of our webinars, I hope. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.